Okay, it's day 101. This is part three, and you saw Task Force and I at the National Archives the other day. In 1998, there was an act that was passed about to declassify the records of the Central Intelligence Agency through this interagency working group um, regarding the Nazis. And until that happened in 1998, which is right here, people really didn't believe that many Nazis had come into the country. But through these records, people were able to write books like Paperclip, Operation Paperclip, which is what it was called. And they were surprised to learn that most of our submarine scientists and most of our space scientists had come from Nazi Germany. They were also increasingly surprised to find out that a lot of the folks were actually hired by Allen Dulles in our intelligence community. So the first wave of folks that were declassified was called the first tier. You're going to recognize the names: Adolf Hitler, Klaus Barbie, the butcher, Adolf Eichmann, who also had a very unsavory reputation, Joseph Mengele, who did all the experiments. I think the Schlachthof 5, I believe he had done a lot of those kind of Yellow House experiments. And the Yellow House experiments that were near the town that was blown up in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5 was very much based on, I believe, Joseph Mengele's experiments down there, and I believe the things that happened in 1970s in the 90s came directly out of that. It's sort of I hate to say, a program that continued with those records in American universities, unfortunately Canadian universities, and universities all around the world. And it's very unfortunate, a lot of the MK Ultra stuff in Canada, etc. But then there's another interesting name here, which is Heinrich Mueller, and I'll get to his story in a second. He was the head of the Gestapo. And then here's Kurt Waldheim. Kurt Waldheim became the UN Secretary General. Now, if you remember, Kennedy makes a speech at the UN in 1962 called the Peace Race. Not the space race, not the arms race, but the peace race. And the reason why he made it was the person who was going to be the Secretary General, and I can't remember his name, died in a plane crash in Africa. And I believe Kurt Waldheim becomes the UN Secretary General because of that. I'm not sure of that. I should check that. But anyway, getting back to Herr Mueller, Heinrich Mueller, there's quite I'll scroll down, there's quite a mystery story around him. Of course, Hitler, everyone speculated about. Eichmann, they said, was very much like Mueller in the sense that they said he died in Munich in 1945. But then he was found by Mossad agents and later murdered, I believe in 1960 or so. If you haven't heard of the famous Dr. Green and Mengele and the whole kind of series of rather sick experiments that came out of Mengele, you can read up on that. Some people say he didn't die in 1979 in Brazil. The movie Boys in Brazil talks a little bit about this. But then there's a movie done, The Odessa Files. So this has been popularized in culture about the Nazis escaping to South America, and some escaped to Fort Hunt here and were hired by Allen Dulles. There's no question about that. And McDuff here locally, his father, did the background checks on a lot of these folks. So we're literally one heartbeat away from verifying all this information. So there's two schools of thought. One was Mueller died in 45, so this is the Berlin Mueller theory, and then there's Mueller in Moscow. My theory is Mueller in Fairfax County here, and I'll go into that. But for some reason, after supposedly he dies, right, and then the Eichmann dies in 1960, the CIA spends all this money and does a huge file and does all these reports looking for Mueller in Moscow in 1970s, and the record ends with Mueller at the archives in 1971 with we just can't find him. And I think this was a throw. I think they were trying to get Mossad. They were trying to throw Mossad off the track here, especially since I believe he was here in Fairfax, Virginia. Now, I'm not saying anything at all about Bob Mueller being related to Heinrich Mueller, but there were people that came and put flowers on his grave years after his death. And he was directly working with the counterintelligence staff of the CIA. I believe he was working when Mueller came here. For instance, Wolf, Alan Dulles used to call him Wolfie. Wolfie ran European counterintelligence for the CIA after the war. Wolfie was the guy who got he went to the Vatican, got Knights of Malta passports for all the Nazis, placed them in consulates, Maltese consulates all over the South America until they could get jobs and so forth and integrate into society. So and then kind of work their way back up. So they were very familiar with counterintelligence, and it is interesting that 1998 and the rise of Bob Mueller is creating the counterintelligence staff of the FBI. Now, I'm not saying McGarity is from this kind of Dukes and the son of Mueller and all this, and Andy McCabe and Priestap and so forth, but stranger things have happened. For instance, Kurt Waldheim coming here with the Nazi file and so forth does go on to become Secretary General of the United States. So if you do look at the file, and for some reason they only released 7 in the initial tier, you'll have Conrad Heinrich, Friedrich Heinrich. You'll see the listing here. I'll scroll down. For some reason, it scrolled away from Mueller, but you can see there's not just 1 or 2 Nazis. There's a number here. I guess that was correct. Conrad Friedrich Heinrich Mueller. He was 36 years old at that time. So could he have fathered a 73-year-old Bob Mueller? Yeah, don't know. Hard to say. So I'll just go to the report and give you a taste of the report. You can see all the folks that worked on it. The interesting thing I saw immediately was Robert Wolf. And it reminded me so much of Wolfie, the guy who was running European counterintelligence for the CIA. So, interesting, very interesting. Ohio University, Portsmouth, Ohio, there. And, of course, then you've got American University. Why wouldn't you? And then you have University of Virginia. So, it's good working group there, interagency working group. If you wanted to throw people off, what you would do if it was me and I was in that inner working group, I would say, hey, here's all the records, 1998, and this proves Robert Mueller is not related to Heinrich Mueller. Just interesting timing that would come out as the Hillary and the PDD 62 gets approved by Bill Clinton. This very well could be PDD 62, the beginnings of PDD 62. It's just amazing amount of happenstance and timing. Teresa Grafenstein, 98, Imran Awan, 98, all these, everything kind of starts in 98 in the run-up to 9/11. So this goes through all the different searches, and you can read that if you want. This is good folklore, good story. I'm not certainly saying that there is any truth or any connection to Robert Mueller, but it is interesting speculation.